have a mission.
Amen.
As a church. Most often we talk about our mission to the non-believers. We call it the Great Commission. You have to take the word out and give it to the people. But we also have a mission to ourselves. A mission to make sure that all believers reach the great resting spot. That we reach the promised land that God has promised. Some people call it the believer's rest. And that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. In Hebrews chapter 4. Starting at verse 1. It says, "Therefore, let us fear, if while a promise remains of entering his rest, any one of you may seem to have come short of it. For indeed, we have had good news preached to us, just as they also. But the word they heard did not profit them, because it was not united by faith in those who heard." What the Hebrews writer is talking about here is he's talking about the people who were wandering in the desert for 40 years. The Exodus generation. And he's offering the church, the first century church, a word of caution. We don't know for certain what group of people this letter was written to or who it was written by. But what we do know, based on what's in here, is that it was a group of Jews, former Jews, who had confessed their faith in Jesus Christ and were now Christians. And we also know that it was probably getting into that time period right around 70 AD when Rome came in and trashed the temple. The church was coming under great amounts of persecution during the latter half and latter third of the first century. And from all sides. And we had, the church in the beginning, just as it is today, was made up of a huge, diverse group of cultures. You know, the backbone of it, of course, was Jewish culture. An Old Testament culture. But we also had to deal, there were also people in there from the pagan cultures. Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, Africans. And most of the people out of that time practiced a polytheistic religious system. They had many gods that represented different things. The idea of a Jewish single God was unheard of. You know, even though they'd been around for several hundred years at this point, they still didn't agree with it. But so the church, now focusing on God and Jesus Christ as the Messiah, not only were they taking the persecution that the Jews had come into them, they added to that the Jewish persecution. And we all know that when somebody in your own family starts to push on you and lean on you because of something you're doing, it usually carries a little bit more weight than somebody else. It seems to push a little bit harder, even though they're doing nothing different. But he wanted the people to realize that you guys have got to stand strong. We haven't reached the promised land yet. Right. It's still yet to come. And he wants us to know that it's not going to be in your best interest to do what the Old Testament church did, what the Old Testament Jews did. And that was to hear the word and say, okay, yeah, God, we got you. And then walk on their merry little way and walk away from God. Say, yeah, we got this. This is no problem. But as the writer continued, starting in verses 3 through 7, he said, for we who have believed enter that rest, just as he said, as I swore on my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although his works were finished from the foundation of the world. For he has said somewhere concerning the seventh day, and God rested on the seventh day from all his works. And again, in this passage, they shall not enter my rest. Therefore, it remains for some to enter, and those who formerly had good news preached to them failed to enter because of disobedience. He again fixes a certain day, today, saying through David, after so long a time, just as has been said before, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. In there, he quotes Psalm 95, starting at verse 7, which says, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you would hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as in the day of Massah, in the wilderness, when your fathers tested me. They tried me, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation, and said they are a people who err in their heart, and they do not know my ways. Therefore I swore in my anger, truly they shall not enter my rest. Those are some pretty harsh words from God. Loathe. Now, when you hear the word loathe, that's a pretty deep-seated dislike of something that's going on, or of another person. And so he's trying to, our writer here is trying to pull the readers in and say, look, you guys are having troubles. I understand that. You know, frequently through this letter, he uses the pronoun we. So he includes himself in all of this. We have this problem. And he wants the believers to take action now so that they don't befall the same fiasco that happened to those in the wilderness. He wants to see them in heaven. He wants to see them in that rest spot. We have that same promise. You know, Psalm 95, he uses that as evidence to show that even at David's time, you know, this is a couple hundred years after they had gotten into Canaan. And he said, look, still today in David's time, they didn't enter rest because of their disobedience. They were still fighting for their lives against their enemies because of their disobedience towards God.